Students disqualified from HKDSE exam because of plagiarism. In Florida, Neighborhood Watch volunteer cleared in black teen shooting. And in Egypt, criminal investigation into Mohammed Morsi.
Hello and a very good evening. High school students will receive their Hong Kong Diploma of Secondary Education examination results tomorrow, but 26 have been disqualified for plagiarism. Still, the Hong Kong Examinations and Assessment Authority is happy with the candidates' overall performance, as the number of those who reached university entrance standards rose by almost 2,000. Joanne Da Silva has more.
More than 81,000 candidates sat this year's Diploma of Secondary Education exams, but at least 26 will not be getting grades for certain subjects due to plagiarism offences. 23 of them, all from the same private education institution, were found to have copied content from the internet in their Chinese class assessment materials without proper referencing. The problem came to light when the Hong Kong Examinations and Assessment Authority took samples of class assessment materials submitted by the school and used anti-plagiarism software to screen them. Since Chinese is one of the core courses, the students involved will not be able to apply for university. Still, the Hong Kong Examinations and Assessment Authority is generally happy with local students' performance, which did not differ much from last year.
The overall performance of candidates in the examination this year, I would say that on the whole, we are happy with the results of the candidates, and we discovered that the results have been very steady.
Almost 50,000 candidates obtained level 2 or above in 5 subjects, including Chinese language and English language, which means they will be eligible to apply for sub-degree courses and relevant civil service posts. And almost 30,000 candidates obtained level 3 or above in both Chinese and English, and level 2 or above in mathematics and liberal studies, making them eligible for local undergraduate programs.
For those wanting to get into university this year, competition will be tougher, as the number of candidates whose grades meet the general admission requirements increased by 2,000. Joanne Da Silva, TVB News.
Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying today admitted there's difficulty in seeking support for landfill expansions from nearby residents. But he also said the government has to do what is needed, and he hopes the whole community will cooperate and be more understanding about the solid waste problem. Ronnie Samtani reports.
After the Legislative Council's summer break, the government will resubmit funding applications for the expansion of the territory's 3 landfills. Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying said residents will always be against landfill expansion plans near their neighborhood. But he said the government will take responsibility for doing what's needed, and it will meet the challenges ahead. He called for the cooperation and understanding of the people. Secretary for the Environment Wong Kam Sing agreed that an expansion of the landfill sites is the only solution right now.
On one hand, Hong Kong does need the landfill extensions to meet the short-term and mid-term need of Hong Kong, because we don't have other end-of-the-pipe treatment for the refuse in Hong Kong.
But Wong emphasized that improvements will be made to minimize the effect of the landfills on nearby residents.
I think we do understand the concern of the different communities, in particular the district councils. So we are going in this summer to work with the district council, how we can strike for a balance, so that we can balance the Hong Kong state and also the local improvement measures, including the refuse trucks, how to improve them, and also how to improve the management of the landfills, so that we can contain the environmental impact to the local environment.
Leung Fuk-yoon, an executive committee member of the Rural Advisory Board, Hung Yi-cook, welcomes the government's offer to widen Nim Wan Road as part of the Chun Mun landfill expansion plan. He said if the government uses Nim Wan Road to create business opportunities in the recycling industry for local residents, villagers will be willing to consider giving their support for the landfill expansion. Ronnie Samtani, TVB News.
On the mainland, there were more demonstrations in Jiangmen in Guangdong province today against the construction of a uranium processing plant, even though officials announced the scrapping of the plan yesterday. The protesters only dispersed after officials produced government documents confirming that the project had really been cancelled. Artero has the story.
Hordes of people gathered in Donghu Square in Jiangmen, surrounding the city's mayor and his deputy. Please don't worry, we respect everyone's opinions. Deputy Mayor Wang Yuesheng called for calm, assuring people that the nuclear fuel processing plant at Heshan has really been cancelled. But that didn't put people's suspicion to an end, with many continuing to hound the officials to keep their word. Mayor Wu Guojie told the media that he would not answer questions on whether this showed a lack of trust in the government. Protesters marched to the municipal government building, demanding documentary proof that the project is now history. Authorities had initially offered to double a 10-day consultation period after people began protesting en masse on Friday, before announcing that the plans had been dropped yesterday. But officials had refused to answer questions on whether the project would be relocated or resurfaced later. They said they're dropping it, but we never saw any proof. Police presence was heavy this morning as protesters took up 3 traffic lanes, marching onto the government building. Finally, the Jiangmen City Party secretary came out to show the public the official document that states plans for the plant have been rejected. Protesters cheered for the newfound success in people power and said they would take to the streets to fight for injustices in the future. Artero, TVB News.
In the United States, a mass protest was held in San Francisco last night, right after a jury found Neighborhood Watch volunteer George Zimmerman not guilty of shooting to death an unarmed black teenager. The case against Zimmerman unleashed a furious debate over racial profiling and self-defense. Hundreds of angry people took to the streets of San Francisco. The outraged masses believe George Zimmerman took the law into his own hands when he shot 17-year-old Trayvon Martin in the central Florida town of Sanford on February 26 of last year. The same disappointment was expressed outside the courtroom in Florida.
The system has failed! The system has failed! I think it's outrageous. George Zimmerman is a cold-blooded murderer. He racially profiled Trayvon, he stopped him and he murdered him.
My biggest disappointment is the fact is that the whole world knows that George Zimmerman committed a murder. Then they had to play the game of technicality.
But the defense is adamant it was self-defense, as Zimmerman thought the teen was going to kill him when he slammed his head against the sidewalk.
George Zimmerman was never guilty of anything except protecting himself in self-defense. I'm glad that the jury saw it that way.
Zimmerman wasn't arrested for 44 days because Florida's stand your ground law on self-defense prohibited police from doing so. But after civil rights protesters angrily demanded, Zimmerman was forced to stand trial for second-degree murder or manslaughter. A jury of 6 women acquitted him on both charges. Still, the defense is disgusted Florida's stand your ground law failed their client.
I think the prosecution of George Zimmerman was disgraceful.
While the prosecution respected the jury's decision, they maintain had Zimmerman not profiled the black teen as a criminal, he'd be alive today.
And if race was one of the aspects in George Zimmerman's mind, then we believe that we put out the proof necessary to show that Zimmerman did profile Trayvon Martin.
Even one juror admitted Zimmerman was in the wrong when he ignored a police dispatcher's instruction not to follow Martin that night. The dead teen was on his way home from the store and had Skittles and a can of iced tea in his pockets. Devastated by the acquittal, the victim's family attorney said he hopes Americans learned from this tragedy.
I think all America has to dig deep in their heart to try to find out how we as a society can learn from this tragedy and how we can make sure that it's not repeated.
The name of a third Chinese girl who died in that Asiana airline plane crash in San Francisco has been released. 15-year-old Liu Yipeng was still in her seat when she was rescued last week. She went to school with the other two teenage girls who were killed in the disaster. She died Friday morning after being listed in critical condition with head injuries. Fire officials also confirmed that one of the other victims, Ye Mengyuan, was hit by a fire truck racing to extinguish the blaze. But a coroner has yet to determine if that or being thrown from the plane led to her death. The body of the third victim, Wang Linjia, was found along with 3 flight attendants who were flung onto the tarmac. Safety officials say investigating the crash could take an entire year.
Egypt's public prosecutors have launched a criminal investigation into former President Mohamed Morsi and senior members of his Muslim Brotherhood. Prosecutors say they are looking at complaints of spying, inciting violence, and endangering the economy. The Egyptian Public Prosecutor's Office is launching a criminal probe into ousted President Mohamed Morsi and members of his Muslim Brotherhood. The complaints include spying, inciting violence, attacking a military barracks, and endangering the economy. Among those named with Morsi include the Brotherhood's leader Mohamed Badi and senior members of the party's political wing. The Brotherhood has rejected the charges, including the one about the recent attack on the Republican Guard compound in Cairo. It says its members were holding a peaceful vigil nearby, and it was they who came under fire from soldiers. The Public Prosecutor's Office didn't say who filed the complaints, but it's yet another blow for the Brotherhood, which has vowed to continue its campaign against the temporary government until Morsi is released. Morsi has been held in an undisclosed location, and the country's first democratically elected leader still hasn't been charged with any crime. The United States, while lukewarm towards Morsi, has called for his release. The Muslim Brotherhood has urged countries around the world not to recognize Egypt's new interim government. Morsi was ousted in a military coup earlier this month after a people power movement to get rid of him. But despite the installation of a provisional government, there's still been no end to the protests. More pro-Morsi rallies were held overnight, with his supporters vowing to continue their campaign of civil disobedience until he is released and reinstated as president. It's unlikely they will get their wish, although interim leader Ali Mansour has promised elections early next year. Dozens have been killed in clashes during major demonstrations by pro- and anti-Morsi protesters in the past few weeks. Russia held its largest ever military drill in its post-Soviet history. At least 160,000 troops took part in the exercise, which involved Russia's entire Far East military sector and part of the Siberian Army section. Apart from tanks and other armoured vehicles, 130 planes and 70 ships were used. The drill reportedly focused on the mass movement of soldiers, transport security, technical and medical support. Russian President Vladimir Putin called for the exercise on Friday after a meeting with the country's defence minister. The reporter who helped Edward Snowden reveal the extent of America's spying activity says the fugitive has even more material which could seriously embarrass Washington. Glenn Greenwald says this should make the US think twice about continuing its pursuit of Snowden. Snowden says he has applied for temporary asylum in Russia, although the country's foreign minister Sergei Lavrov says he hasn't received any formal request. Snowden is believed to be in a Moscow airport and is trying to reach Latin America. He says he has no regrets about leaking the information despite the high price he has paid.
And still to come in our newscast, pricing claims to come under tighter control. P&B celebrates its 80th birthday. And a mural of Mandela made of 5,000 cupcakes.
Why this watch? This watch has seen the ancient amaze. Bunkers like craters, and a duel as epic as the ages. It's witnessed the birthplace of golf. The elements confound, and age-old records beaten. It doesn't just tell time, it tells history. They were born different.